Um, a high-end hotel lounge. Sitting in front of me is a woman so stunning, she could easily be mistaken for an actress. Despite the miraculous nature of this arranged marriage meeting, there's hardly any conversation, let alone excitement. The first 3 minutes were the only enjoyable part. I sigh internally. That said, it's an arrangement decided between our families. I wasn't enthusiastic about it to begin with, so it makes sense that she feels the same. I was sure this would be brushed off as if it never happened, and I'd simply return to my dreary daily life. Please marry me. Her unexpected words left me stunned and frozen. She'd always given me nothing but curt replies before. Without a change in expression or a hint of emotion in her voice, she proposed marriage. And so, from this meeting onward, my life, or rather, my entire existence, began to change. My name is Kyle. I'm 25 years old, living at home while working under my father, the company CEO. My jet black hair and sharp, slightly upturned eyes are traits I inherited from him. A diligent father, a kind mother, and a caring younger brother 2 years my junior. Throughout my school years, I consistently achieved top-class grades and was considered promising for the future. Born and raised in a wealthy family, I received the best education possible, nurtured like a fragile plant in a greenhouse. I, too, believed this environment was a blessing. But that all changed after graduating from college. I'm not boasting, but I've always been talented. My one fatal flaw, however, is my inability to communicate well with others. Back in school, this wasn't much of a problem. But in the real world, things are different. My lack of communication skills directly impacted my work. At the office, poor coordination led to missed information. On sales visits, I struggled to speak, prompting clients to call the company requesting a change of representative. Before long, people began saying my younger brother, Henry, was far better suited to succeed my father as the next CEO. I may have been wrong to bring you into this company. I still remember my father's words on the day I completed my first year at the company. His expression was harsher than ever, his eyes empty and cold, reflecting his disappointment in me. Since that day, he distanced me from any meaningful work, as though he had given up on me entirely. Now, I spend my days handling insignificant tasks, buried in a loneliness incomparable to my student years. At this point, I'm nothing but a burden to the company, a useless heir to the CEO. I really don't want to go to work. That muttered phrase, now part of my daily routine, escapes my lips alongside a sigh. But even if I quit this job, there's no way someone like me could work anywhere else. I imagine a future where I remain unemployed, relying on my mother to take care of me while I continue to leech off my family. That's one thing I definitely want to avoid. Shaking my head to dispel the unpleasant thought, I sluggishly get out of bed when I hear my younger brother, Henry, call from outside the door. Hey! Are you up? Yeah, I just woke up. What's up? I open the door to let him in. With his soft, light brown hair that resembles his mother's and his round, friendly-looking eyes. It feels as though the very atmosphere of the room brightens up just by Henry being there. It's hard to believe someone like him is my brother. He's cheerful, responsible, and has a wide circle of friends. He's also smart enough to consistently rank near the top of his class. While his overly kind nature sometimes worries me, he's always been my precious little brother. Dad said to come to his study later. He says he has something important to discuss. Henry speaks while looking down. Something important, huh? Judging by his demeanor, it's not good news. I see. Thanks. Can you tell him I'll be there as soon as I get ready? Kyle. Sorry, I'm always making you act like a messenger pigeon. I flash a faint smile at Henry. Since that day my father lost faith in me, our conversations have dwindled to almost nothing. It's not just that we stopped talking about work, I'd been avoiding him out of fear. And I imagine my father feels the same. Eventually, we began communicating through family members, like now. I know how amazing you are, Kyle. You've always been good at everything. Teachers, friends, everyone praised you. And when I was bullied, you were the first to come and save me. To me, you've always been my hero, someone I've looked up to." His words, as earnest as ever, make my back itch with embarrassment, and I let out a bitter laugh. That's just how Henry is. With his straightforward and honest heart, he says things like this without a hint of embarrassment. And he simply cannot tell a lie. But I can see the sadness and worry on his face. He must already know what our father plans to tell me. Thanks. And sorry for always making you worry. Kyle, I still think you're the one who should inherit the company. If you just found the right environment, Dad would. Your words mean a lot, but I know my limits. If someone like me, who lacks the drive and skills, were to take over, the company and everyone in it would suffer. Someone like you would be far better for the company. Besides, didn't you say you wanted to help Dad? That's only because I thought I'd be working with you. I'm nothing compared to you. I always thought I'd be supporting you, helping you protect the company together. You've got talents far beyond just supporting me. You're someone who pays close attention to others and acts accordingly. With you around, Henry, I'm sure even Dad would feel at ease. I added, though your kindness worries me sometimes, with a small smile, but Henry didn't smile back. Letting out a quiet sigh, I walked over to Henry, who was showing a hint of frustration. Then, I gently ruffled his soft, fluffy hair. "You'll be fine, Henry. I guarantee it. Kyle. Now, go let Dad know. I'll get ready and head there soon." Henry murmurs a small okay before leaving the room. After watching his retreating figure, I quickly get dressed and head for my father's study. As expected, the news was not good. "You'll be transferred to Harris Industries to work on improving their operations." Harris Industries, one of our company's subsidiaries in a regional city, one that, like me, is seen as dead weight. To outsiders, this might look like the CEO's son taking on the challenge of reforming operations, but in reality, it's nothing more than a convenient way to get rid of me. A polite exile, in other words. Additionally, Mr. Harris has no heir, but he does have a daughter. We've already arranged for you to meet her for a potential marriage. The transfer is in 3 days, and the meeting with her will take place 2 days after that. Not only a demotion but also an arranged marriage. And apparently, the marriage arrangement assumes I'll be joining their family. It's clear now, my father has completely abandoned me. A swirl of complicated emotions churns in my chest, but I suppress them and simply reply, yes. Without breaking eye contact, my father continues in his monotone voice, "Do your best there. That's all. Start preparing." I bowed silently and left the study. I never looked my father straight in the face, not even until the very end. I hadn't expected the words I muttered that morning to come true, but with a sigh of relief at finally being free from the suffocating days, I began preparing to move out. In the end, I never faced my father, and the morning of my departure arrived. As I stood at the front door checking my belongings, my mother and Henry watched over me. "Make sure to contact us once you arrive, okay?" Yeah. I got it. Honestly. Dad could have at least shown up today. Henry mutters, his face scrunched into a sulk. "It's fine. He's probably busy with work. Having you and Mom here is more than enough for me." As I say this, Mom grips my hand tightly. "I'm sorry. I tried talking to your father, but it's okay, really. By the way, why does my bag feel so heavy? Did you put something in there, Mom? When I checked earlier, it didn't weigh this much. Now, it's practically dragging my arm down." "Oh. I figured you'd be busy once you got there, so I made some food that you can eat right away. Your favorite beef and potato stew. And a few other things, too." Mom gives me a playful wink. She's always loved cooking, and our meals have always been her handiwork. For decades, she's even made my father's lunches every day. The thought of not being able to eat her cooking anymore makes me feel unexpectedly sentimental. Don't worry. If you need anything, I'll send it. Just remember to do your own cleaning and laundry. I taught you well, didn't I? Yeah, Mom, you were pretty strict about that. She really drilled it into us, didn't she? Under Mom's philosophy, men need to know how to do housework too. Henry and I learned the basics of everything from a young age. Although, in my case, I never really got the hang of it. I only managed to reach a barely competent level. Meanwhile, Dad would sneak off to avoid getting dragged into it, only to get scolded later. Ha ha. Those were good times. Until now, I'd rarely thought back to my childhood. But these memories surfacing now make it clear, I'm sentimental about leaving home. Once I leave, I won't be back for a long time. Even if I somehow manage to turn things around, I doubt my father will ever call me back here. Sensing my unspoken feelings, Mom speaks to me in an unusually gentle tone. Kyle, take care of yourself, okay? If anything happens, you can always come back. This is your home. Saying that, she gently rubbed my back. Her hands were as warm and gentle as they had always been. The moment I felt that warmth, tears welled up in my eyes. That's right. You'll always be an important part of this family, Kyle. Henry's voice, on the verge of tears, tugged at my heartstrings even more. Whether it was when I was overwhelmed by my father's strict upbringing or when I felt like I didn't belong at work, it was my mother and Henry who supported me. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Henry. Wiping away my tears, I tightened my grip on the handle of my bag. Looking at both of them, I smile and say, I'm off, before stepping out the door. Harris Industries has been struggling for years. Under pressure from the parent company, they seem desperate to turn things around, but the work environment is completely toxic. The managers are unmotivated, and the employees have lost all drive. The office is dead silent, even during breaks, with a gloominess that feels like a perpetual funeral. Everyone's faces look drained and lifeless, and just being there makes me feel weighed down. Oh, we're so honored to have Mr. Miller's brilliant son here. I'm sure our performance will skyrocket now. With a voice far too cheerful for the atmosphere, Mr. Harris sidled up to me. The talented son of Mr. Miller. At those words, I couldn't help but furrow my brow, though Mr. Harris seemed entirely unbothered. And to think such a fine young man would marry my Claire. Not only will the company thrive, but my family will be secure as well. Ha ha ha. Right. Even though I haven't even met his daughter yet and nothing about the arrangement has been finalized, Mr. Harris is smiling happily. Most likely, just like my father, he already sees my marriage to his daughter as a done deal. Despite my worries about what I would do if we were completely incompatible, the day of my arranged meeting with Claire, Mr. Harris's only daughter, arrived before I knew it. In an elegant lounge of a luxury hotel, I sat across from her. Claire, sitting in front of me, is even more beautiful than the actresses you see on TV, and I can't help but feel intimidated. Her clear, fair skin, the graceful line of her nose, and her slightly drooping eyes gave her a blend of elegance and gentle charm. Her long, slightly brown-tinted hair shone with a silky luster, making me want to reach out and touch it. Unlike her round, jovial father, Claire's only resemblance to him might have been her eyes. As I silently observed her, our gazes suddenly met. Caught staring so rudely, I quickly looked away, my face heating up. It only lasted a moment, but the simple fact of meeting her gaze made my heart pound noisily in my chest. After exchanging greetings, a female relative of Mr. Harris, who was acting as the matchmaker, took care of various arrangements. However, she quickly said, I'll come back when the time is right, so I'll leave the rest to you two, and left us alone. An awkward silence settled between us. I struggled to find anything, to talk about. It's nice weather today, isn't it? Yes, it is. Ah, The weather, my go-to conversation starter, was shot down in an instant. Claire remained expressionless since the meeting began. Even a polite, fake smile would have been better than this unrelenting silence. Trying to salvage the situation, I pressed on. So, do you have a favorite food? I really like beef and potato stew, but it's pretty hard to make on your own, isn't it? The first time I tried, it was a complete disaster. Even now, I'm not very good at it. Oh, right. Did you know where the name for Jagayamo potatoes in Japanese comes from? Back then, Jakarta was called Jakarta, and potatoes were brought to Japan from there. They were initially called Jagatara Imo, which eventually transformed into Jagayamo. During times of famine in Japan, they were highly valued and widely spread as a reliable crop. Even after all my effort, Claire didn't react. Not even a nod. Her gaze remained downcast, and she hadn't looked me in the eye since our initial greeting. I tried shifting topics to family, to student life, but it was just me talking to myself. With my limited ability to hold a conversation, I quickly ran out of things to say, and silence filled the space once again. It was unbearably awkward. Mr. Harris might want me to marry Claire, but, honestly, I can't imagine living with someone like this, I thought to myself. Claire hasn't said a word or even looked me in the eye this entire time. I wouldn't call myself particularly sociable, nor am I good at conversation, but I think I'm better than her, at least a little. I can't say I know the real her, but even after just 30 minutes, this is how it's been. At this rate, being together every day would feel suffocating. It feels like something from a different era, but this is an arrangement our parents decided on without us. Just like me, she's probably not very keen on this engagement either. Alright, how should I go about turning this down? Or will the matchmaker just come back and say, "It seems this wasn't a good match," sparing us both the trouble? As these thoughts swirled in my mind, I heard her voice, soft but clear. "Please." "Excuse me?" I blinked and looked up, caught off guard. Claire had finally lifted her head, and for the first time, her gaze met mine. Her gaze and expression remained as cold as ever, but her perfectly shaped lips, painted in a soft pink, moved. "Please marry me." Pardon? I had been busy wondering who would be the one to turn this engagement down, so her sudden proposal hit me like a bolt from the blue. And just like that, before I could even fully process it, my marriage to Claire was decided. Mr. Harris had been hoping for an extravagant wedding, but my father claimed he couldn't make time due to work. So, for the time being, we skipped the ceremony, and Claire and I were simply registered as a married couple and began living together. As expected, our marriage was nothing more than two strangers sharing a living space. There was no communication to speak of, and naturally, we slept in separate rooms. Both of us were working demanding jobs at Harris Industries, so our schedules rarely aligned anyway. The housework for two people turned out to be much harder than I'd expected. Within just a few days of living together, the house fell into chaos. This first experience of living with someone else was nothing but stressful for me. Caught between a toxic work environment and an equally suffocating home, I found myself prioritizing work. At least at work, I could exchange basic conversations with my colleagues, which felt far less draining than speaking to my unresponsive wife. Having no one to talk to is this stressful, huh? In hindsight, I was probably the worst version of myself back then. With that thought lingering in my mind, I threw myself into work. My daily routine consisted of coming home just to sleep and catching up on housework during my days off. Physically, I was exhausted, but strangely enough, I found myself starting to enjoy my job at Harris Industries. The reason? I wasn't stuck doing sales or menial tasks anymore. I had been put in charge of systems management. Back at my father's company, I was never allowed to touch this kind of work because it wasn't considered part of the training to become a CEO. But here, I got to work on the company's outdated and inefficient systems, which suited me perfectly. I was always better at quietly working on a computer than at dealing with people. Harris Industries had so many weaknesses that it was easy for me to spot issues and start fixing them. The changes I implemented were well received by the employees, and slowly but surely, the work environment began to improve. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of fulfillment from my job. Ha ha! Kyle, you're truly impressive. To achieve so much in such a short time, it's remarkable. Mr. Harris, now my father-in-law, beamed with pride. I haven't done anything extraordinary, really. But I'm glad everyone's happy with the improvements. I scratched my head awkwardly, smiling a little. Well, if we could see some grandchildren soon, that would really be the cherry on top. Ha ha. Ah, ha ha. The thought of children with Claire, given how little we even spoke, seemed impossible. I swallowed the words that almost escaped my mouth and instead plastered on a polite smile. A month passed since our marriage. Good morning, Claire. Good morning. The fact that we'd reached the point of exchanging simple greetings was perhaps the only improvement. I headed to the kitchen to make myself a coffee, just as Claire left the living room. Today's a day off, right? The weather's nice. Do you want to go somewhere? No. I have somewhere I want to go. Can I come along, or? I'll be fine on my own. Oh, I see. She flatly turned me down and returned to her room. I had been trying, in my own clumsy way, to bridge the gap between us, but her cold indifference always left me deflated. Sighing, I started brewing my coffee while mentally running through my to-do list for the day. I wasn't great at housework, but Claire seemed to struggle even more. The house was constantly in a state of disarray. Neither of us could cook, so our meals were almost always convenience store ready meals or discounted side dishes from the supermarket. I mean, it's fine if the one who can do the housework just does it, but I wish you'd at least show a little more willingness to help out. I grimaced as I tasted my bitter, overly strong coffee, letting out another sigh. Maybe I'll talk to her when she gets back. We haven't even had a proper meal together lately. I'll try cooking something. At least it'll give us something to talk about. I wasn't confident in my cooking skills, but I figured a home-cooked meal might at least brighten up the table a little. Alright, first things first, laundry and cleaning. Then I'll go grocery shopping. Maybe I'll call Mom for some advice on recipes while I'm at it. Relying on my mother still stung my pride a bit, but I knew better than to pass up advice from a seasoned pro. With that thought, I gulped down my coffee and got to work. Alright. I somehow managed to finish this. Even though I only managed to follow half of my mother's advice, and with some help from cooking videos, I managed to prepare dinner. The menu was white rice, miso soup, salad, and beef and potato stew. Since I was going through the effort, I selfishly made what I wanted to eat. But, unsurprisingly, the potatoes had completely fallen apart. Still, I'd used some decent quality meat, so I figured it balanced out. As I nodded to myself in self-satisfaction, Claire walked in, right on cue. Claire walked into the living room and stared intently at the dishes laid out on the dining table. Oh, welcome back. I made dinner, so maybe we could eat together. I'm fine. Her immediate, curt response cut me off mid-sentence. The quick dismissal stung more than I'd like to admit, but I decided to try again. We're both busy, and we haven't really spent any time together. Maybe just this once. Please don't concern yourself with me. As Claire hurried toward her room after saying that, I found myself stopping her without thinking. Even if you don't want to spend time with me, don't you think you're being too cold? You don't do any housework, you're never home. And today you were out all day. We live together, this isn't right. I couldn't hide the frustration in my voice. Silent again. You've barely spoken to me since we met. What's the point of us even being married? My voice softened toward the end, turning into something closer to a question for myself. If she didn't care this much, Why did she even agree to marry me? That's when I heard her faint voice. I really did try. Claire, whose arm I had grabbed, muttered something in a small voice. Her voice sounded like she was on the verge of tears, and, feeling confused, I called her name. Claire? I tried my best at first, you know. I watched and imitated what I could, but I just couldn't get it right, and instead, I ended up making more work for you. I thought, if it was only going to add to your burden when you came home exhausted every day, it'd be better if I didn't interfere at all. Saying that, she started to cry, tears spilling down her face. Not knowing how to comfort a crying woman, I fumbled awkwardly, completely at a loss. Ignoring my flustered state, Claire continued to speak. My parents were always working, so I was alone all the time. And just when life finally seemed stable, my mother passed away. After that, we had housekeepers, but they didn't care about me at all. I ate at a big, empty table, all by myself. There was no one to talk to. No one around me, I was completely alone. Claire, despite being the daughter of a small company CEO, is still the only child of a CEO. So I just assumed she'd been raised in a similar environment to mine, cherished and cared for. Even though she never spoke about it, I never imagined she'd been living such a lonely life. All I could do was sit silently and listen to her story. But then my father told me to get married. He said a woman's happiness is in marriage. But I don't even know what a marriage is supposed to be like. I know what a wife is supposed to do, but I can't do it. I wanted a warm, happy family, but I don't have the ability or the know-how to make it happen. Her voice, full of pain, pierced through me. Gently, I released her arm and said softly, "I'm sorry. I didn't know you'd been trying so hard, Claire. I didn't notice how much this marriage had been hurting you. I was so caught up in my own struggles that I never thought to look at things from your perspective. I'm really sorry. I didn't say anything either. Yeah, but I should have tried harder to understand you. I wanted to know what you were feeling. Maybe if I had, I could have approached things differently. But I just gave up because you didn't say anything. I didn't know how to talk to you. I've barely ever spoken to men before. Well, that makes two of us. I never know what to say to women either." I was completely panicking on our first meeting. You were. You didn't look like it. I actually enjoyed listening to you talk. Wait, seriously? When I asked her that, Claire gave a small nod. I couldn't believe that even a conversation like that had made her happy. Her unexpected words made my face grow hot. I'm not good at showing emotions on my face, so it's hard to tell, isn't it? Well, yeah, a little. Honestly, I thought you hated me. I've been sure of it since the day we met. That's not true. At my words, Claire raised her voice this time. I didn't know what to do, but it's not like I dislike you or anything. Claire's voice was soft, her ears turning faintly red as she spoke. Seeing that, my heart began to race. Well, I'm just glad we've cleared up the misunderstanding. I'm not great at housework either, so why don't we figure it out together? If it's still too hard, there are plenty of tools and conveniences out there we can use. Together. Yeah. Let's do this together. At my words, Claire gave me the faintest smile. It was the first time I'd ever seen her smile. It was more beautiful and delicate than I could have imagined, and for a moment, I couldn't look away. From that day on, everything began to change. We started doing housework together, failing and learning as we went. On weekends, we'd go out when we could. And when our schedules allowed, we'd sit down and share meals together. We'd laugh at small, insignificant conversations over dinner. The warm, loving home she wished for. I wonder if we're getting even a little closer to that. This change at home began to ripple into my work life as well. Claire, who always seemed distant at the office, started smiling more. And maybe it was the same for me. You two are such a sweet couple. Just seeing you makes me feel happier, like I'm getting some of that joy for myself. One of the colleagues said this with a grin. Claire and I exchanged an embarrassed glance and shared a shy laugh. Seeing us, more colleagues began to gather around. Ever since Claire got married, her smiles have become more frequent, and we couldn't be happier for her. And ever since you came, Kyle, this place has changed for the better. It's so much easier to work now. The whole company feels brighter. Come on, that's an exaggeration. It's not. Isn't that right, Claire? Looking surprised when a female colleague brought it up, Claire glanced up at me and said with a smile, just like everyone says, Kyle coming here has been such a huge help for all of us. Of course, for me too. With such a beautiful and wonderful wife, and being together both at home and at work, man, I'm jealous. I want to get married, too. When the youngest employee shouted that, teasing voices rang out around him, saying things like, better find someone first. And then, we all burst out laughing together. Back in school, or even at my father's company, I'd always been alone. But now, here I was, laughing with everyone. It was hard to believe, even for me. This change was undeniably because of Claire. Being with her made me feel at ease, and somehow, I started smiling more naturally. It was because she had accepted me that I'd found the ability to accept others. Even if someone out there didn't like me, it didn't matter. Because I had her. So it's okay. That thought alone made talking to people so much easier. As I got lost in my thoughts, a colleague's question suddenly pulled me back to reality. By the way, Kyle, why did you come to our company? I mean, no offense, but our company isn't doing so well. So it's kind of seen as a place for demotions. Hey, that's rude. Everyone kept apologizing, but unsure how to respond, I could only manage a wry smile. It's fine. But I wish you wouldn't think of it that way. Everyone here works hard. If anything, our struggles were because each person had too much on their plate, and the company wasn't functioning efficiently. That's exactly it. You keep spotting problems one after another and fixing them all in no time. Everyone's been wondering, just who is Kyle? The others nodded eagerly. I laughed softly and scratched my head. You're exaggerating again. But as I looked at their curious faces, I realized something. I could tell them the truth. Back in school, I once scored an IQ of 180 on a test. Because of that, everyone praised me and said I was a genius. But when I stepped into the real world, I was completely useless. I was all brains and no people skills. I couldn't communicate. And it caused all sorts of problems at work. School smarts mean nothing if you can't work with others. I learned that the hard way. When I finished speaking, everyone exchanged glances. The silence made me a little nervous. I wondered if they were disappointed after seeing the real me. But then, an unexpected chorus of voices rose up. Who on earth said you were useless? Thanks to Kyle, this company has become so much easier to work at. It's all because of the knowledge and strength you've been building up all along. That's right. We can't thank you enough. I couldn't help but look at Claire. She was nodding along with everyone else. Everyone. Kyle, don't cry now. You'll get us all crying too. Sorry. I just feel so happy. Forgetting my age, I let tears fall in front of everyone. They acknowledged me. That made me so happy, and I felt that I could truly keep giving my best alongside them. That feeling was so strong. On the way home that evening, I was walking with Claire toward our house. I'm glad I came here. I met everyone, learned how enjoyable work can be, and since I started spending time with you, so many positive changes have happened. Saying that, I took Claire's hand. My heart raced at that first touch. Claire looked surprised, but she didn't pull her hand away. Thanks to you, I'm living such a fulfilling life now. Really, thank you. I looked straight into Claire's eyes as I expressed my feelings. From her hand, I felt her warmth, and my heart pounded even harder. I feel the same. Meeting you taught me the warmth of family. Every day, my heart feels so warm. This must be what happiness is like. As she said that, Claire brought my hand to her cheek and gently leaned into it. The soft feel of her skin made heat rush straight to my face. Hey, Kyle. It's my dad's birthday this Sunday. Oh, really? Then let's go celebrate. I'd also like to officially greet your dad. Greet him? To say, please let me marry Claire. I never got the chance to say it properly after our arranged meeting. Back then, I hadn't even gotten close to Claire, and marriage didn't feel real yet, but now, it's different. I want to be with Claire. If possible, I want to spend the rest of my life with her. Her family background wasn't ideal, but I wanted to let Mr. Harris, who raised her, know that I would make her happy and ask for his blessing. Kyle, thank you. My dad and I aren't exactly on bad terms, but we don't get along well either. I hope this can be a chance to talk more. With your help, would that be okay? Of course. Since I had struggles with my own father, maybe I could help Claire in some way. With that thought, I smiled at her as she looked up at me anxiously. Hearing my answer, she looked relieved and relaxed. I think I'll bring some of Dad's favorite beef and potato stew for him. Really? That's my favorite too. My dad loved the beef and potato stew my mom used to make. So, when you said you liked beef and potato stew during our arranged meeting, I was really happy. Wait, was that one of the reasons you decided to marry me? Not the only reason, but it was one of the deciding factors. Saying that, Claire smiled shyly. On the day of the meeting, when she didn't seem particularly eager, her sudden "please marry me" had puzzled me, but to think beef and potato stew was the clincher. I owe my mother, who made me a fan of beef and potato stew. Are you shocked? Not at all. I'm actually really happy. Wanting to reassure Claire, who looked a little uneasy, I smiled warmly at her. On his birthday, let's make a delicious beef and potato stew and bring it for him. We'll prepare lots of other things your father likes, too. I'm sure he'll be happy. Yeah. Claire nodded happily at my words. She was probably imagining her father's delighted face. In that moment, her innocent expression reminded me of a young girl, and I felt an overwhelming tenderness toward her. I gently squeezed her hand, and she squeezed mine back. Hand in hand, we walked home, talking excitedly about what to prepare for the birthday. And then the day came. When we arrived, Mr. Harris's face was unexpectedly stern. Dad, I have something to say. Come in. Led by Claire, we entered the living room where Mr. Harris was waiting, and before we could even greet him, he spoke. Claire. Break up with this man. What? Dad, what are you talking about? Claire and I froze at his shocking words. Ignoring our reaction, he turned his harsh gaze toward me this time. I've been completely deceived by you too. I heard you were capable, yet I'm told you're utterly useless. And you're not even an heir, your own family cast you out. Marrying you brings no benefit to this family. You're good for nothing, except for scheming. But I won't let you have your way any longer. I'll be taking my daughter back. His anger radiated in waves. Dad, stop saying such horrible things about Kyle. He's a wonderful man who stays by my side. And thanks to him, the company has been improving. Hasn't it? Claire. Quiet, Claire. The company's recovery was pure luck. It has nothing to do with him. Did he fill your head with lies to trick you? This is absurd. Claire stepped in front of me, shielding me, but Mr. Harris's fury had completely taken over, and he wouldn't listen. Dad, please calm down. Today is supposed to be a celebration. Look. We prepared all of this for you." Saying that, she placed the bags of food and gifts on the table. "But, trying to win me over with things, are you? I won't fall for that." Crash! He grabbed the bag from Claire and flung it against the wall. The food, the flowers, and the carefully wrapped presents all scattered onto the floor alongside a nearby vase. Of course, the beef and potato stew she had poured her heart into making Mr. Harris's favorite dish had also ended up in a miserable heap, spilled across the floor. "No." Hearing Claire's voice, filled with sadness and despair, made my mind go blank. Before I knew it, I had grabbed Mr. Harris by the collar. "Do you realize what you've just done? Ah! Let go. Insult me all you want, I don't care. Say whatever you like. But what you just destroyed was everything Claire prepared for you, thinking only of your happiness. She even tried to recreate the beef and potato stew her mother used to make for you, all so you'd smile again. And you..." At my words, Mr. Harris's gaze shifted to the mess on the floor. A flicker of realization crossed his face. I didn't apologize to Claire. Do you even know how much she suffered all these years, unable to fill the loneliness she felt? She's been living through so much pain, and yet just now, you trampled on her kindness. And on top of that, you're treating her like some pawn for your own purposes. My grip on Mr. Harris's collar tightened even more. I'd never been so furious in my life. I clenched my free hand, ready to strike. "Kyle, stop. That's enough." Claire. Her small hand rested gently on mine. That warmth pulled me back to my senses. I let go of Mr. Harris and pulled Claire into a protective embrace. "Dad, I've made up my mind. I'm leaving this family." "What? My family was always just you and my late mother." "That's why I joined the company when you asked, and why I agreed to the arranged marriage. I thought, as long as it made you happy, that was enough." "But..." Claire looked straight at Mr. Harris as she spoke. His face twisted slightly, showing a trace of pain. "I can't leave Kyle. Even though our marriage was arranged by our parents, he stayed by my side and filled my heart with kindness. From now on, I want to walk with him. Claire, thank you for everything until now. Goodbye, Dad." With those words, Claire and I left the house without looking back. Once we had walked a short distance away, Claire suddenly stopped. Her shoulders were trembling slightly. Seeing her like that was unbearable, and I wrapped her in my arms. "You did really well. It's because you were with me, Kyle. Thank you." Her voice was tearful but carried no regret, only strength. The Claire I had first met wouldn't have been able to make such a decision. "Kyle, I'm sorry. I ended up dragging you into this." "What are you talking about? The company, it'll be hard for you to stay there now, won't it?" She looked at me apologetically, and I smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry about that. Watching you make this decision gave me the courage to make one of my own." She tilted her head, not understanding what I meant. "I'm going to quit the company and start my own business. I want to free myself from my father's expectations, just like you did." Like Claire, I had always tried to walk the path my father wanted for me. Even when I failed and was cast out, I never tried to improve myself or speak up for what I wanted. I'd been living without a voice of my own. But Claire helped me realize that I couldn't protect the things that mattered unless I chose my own path. "I might make things really difficult for us in the future, but will you stay by my side anyway?" I asked Claire that question as she rested in my arms. In response, Claire looked up at me and said, "Of course. If I'm with you, Kyle, I know we can overcome anything. So, let me stay with you forever." Her clear, beautiful eyes reflected her sincerity as they slowly closed. And then, we shared our first, gentle kiss. From that moment on, Claire and I began preparing to start our own business. Though we thought we'd be going it alone, as soon as I announced my resignation, the unexpected happened. "If you two are leaving, we'll go with you," many of my colleagues said. Despite the short time I had spent at Harris Industries, we had built a strong bond of trust. Thanks to their support, along with a bit of luck, our new company thrived. We expanded our business rapidly, and the media began to take notice. One day, among the many partnership offers we received, I spotted the name of my father's company. Sensing the lingering conflict in my heart, Claire suggested, "Let's visit your family and say hello." Although I had been in touch with my mother and younger brother Henry, it had been a year since Claire met my family and I spoke with my father. When we arrived, my mother welcomed Claire with open arms, saying joyfully, "It's like I finally have the daughter I've always wanted." The two of them quickly bonded, leaving me behind in their conversation. Henry, too, was all smiles as he cheerfully called Claire's sister-in-law and offered his heartfelt congratulations. The real challenge was my father. As I stood there, unsure of how to begin, Claire gently placed a hand on my back. "With who you are now, Kyle, you can talk to your father properly. It'll be okay." Encouraged by her words, I faced my father. The moment I stepped into his office, he surprised me by saying, "I was wrong. I pushed my own expectations onto you without ever listening to your side. I'm truly sorry." He explained that my transfer to Harris Industries was never meant as a demotion. It was a test to see how I would approach work without my parents' oversight. He had planned to bring me back to the main office or transfer me to a different department after evaluating my progress. As for the arranged marriage with Claire, it had come from his concern that I was still single with no sign of settling down. My mother had scolded him severely for never explaining any of this to me. "I haven't seen a storm like that hit him in years," Henry whispered with a grin. Though I decided to spare my father's pride by leaving the details unsaid. While my reconciliation with my father went smoothly, Claire's situation took longer. As for Harris Industries after that, many employees, including us, resigned, leaving the company unable to function. The business, which had just started to recover, quickly declined again. Moreover, they abandoned the systems I had worked hard to improve and reverted to their toxic, inefficient practices. Eventually, a petition was sent to the parent company. As a result, Mr. Harris's management abilities were scrutinized and exposed, leading to his removal from the position. A new CEO was appointed in his place. 2 years after Mr. Harris had been removed from his position, he came to visit us unexpectedly. Mr. Harris, looking nothing like his former self and appearing somewhat aged, bowed deeply to us. "Claire, Kyle, I've done so many unforgivable things. I'm truly sorry. Dad. Claire, I made a promise to your mother before she passed away to ensure your happiness. Because you had to endure hardships when you were young. I was determined to give you a life of comfort and abundance. Having pulled myself up from poverty, I thought wealth was the key to happiness. So I arranged for you to meet someone who could guarantee a stable future. Becoming the wife of a company heir would mean you'd never worry again. I truly thought it was all for you, but I was wrong about everything." Tears filled his eyes as he wiped them away. "After you both left that day, I ate the beef and potato stew you made for me. It was delicious, just like what your mother used to make. I never let you do any housework because I didn't want you to struggle, yet here you were, making such a wonderful meal. I remembered you saying that Kyle had helped you, and that's when it finally hit me. What you wanted, what you had always longed for, wasn't wealth, it was a family. Someone who would stand by your side, no matter what. That's right. I wanted to spend time with you and Mom. If work or housework was hard, I wanted to help. I wanted us to work together. To share our burdens." Claire's voice trembled as she spoke. Slowly, she reached out and placed her hand gently over her father's. "Claire, I should have talked to you properly back then, just like Kyle did. I'm sorry, Dad. Claire. I'm the one who should be apologizing. Kyle, thank you. Thank you for taking care of my daughter, for cherishing her as I should have. At that, Mr. Harris broke down, his shoulders shaking as he cried. Claire sat beside him, gently patting his hunched back with care. Mr. Harris, no, Dad. I'm grateful, too. Because of Claire, I've found happiness. And, next spring, our family will grow even larger. There's nothing more I could ask for. Mr. Harris's head shot up, his eyes wide as he turned to look at Claire. Meeting that gaze, Claire smiled softly and gently caressed her belly with a look of affection. Is it true? Claire, Kyle, congratulations. Dad, you're crying too much. Right, Kyle? While Mr. Harris began to sob uncontrollably with tears of joy, Claire gazed at him with a look of exasperation. Yet her expression was unmistakably one of happiness. In the end, both Claire and I overcame the rifts we had with our fathers. I learned something important through it all. Even between parents and children, if you don't communicate, misunderstandings will grow. And with others, it's even more true. That's why it's so important to talk to the people who matter to you. Be honest about what you feel. Choose your words with care, thinking of the other person's heart. Because that's how trust is built, and I was lucky enough to learn that.